Hello,
Well,
everyone.
hello.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Surprise, surprise. I'm on time. Troy is in
Mm-hmm.
absentia. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's okay, though. It's okay.
It's the way it works.
It is.
Howdy, kill a lot.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. Glad you can make it.
We got a good one in the can tonight, I think. I feel like we got some good, there's some juice in this one. I'm pretty excited, honestly.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be great.
There he is. We are live, Troy. Welcome back.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Uh,
Feel better?
we
I think
weren't sure if we were gonna do this one or not, but
Mm-hmm.
we were all back in time and
sure, I didn't go anywhere.
ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
So
Had a
we're good
long
to go.
weekend. I still worked.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on Saturday
Mm,
for like half the day. It was
Mm.
great.
Mm.
I
Pleasant.
worked. I worked all weekend,
Um,
whether I
Oh.
was at work or
I shouldn't
whatever.
complain though, honestly, because in IT, there were like two other teams that worked like Thanksgiving, like all day long,
Wow.
12 hours on Thanksgiving.
Ooh.
We had an
Wow.
outage that we
Mm.
had to
Mm.
fix, but I got the tail end of it.
I tell you, it was not. The restaurant was closed, so that was nice. I didn't have to go in there. But for like 20 years, I had to work every Thanksgiving
Mm-hmm.
because it's crazy. The night before and the night of Thanksgiving are huge party nights.
The night of Thanksgiving,
Uh huh. I mean,
it's
think
weird to
about it.
me.
You're stuck with family that you haven't seen all year, pretty much, and you're
Okay.
like, I can't handle it anymore.
Going out.
I'm going out.
Let's run its keepers.
Let's get wasted.
Well, let's see. Tonight we're going to talk about splitting the party,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got some news for you. Um,
We've got news.
we might as well go ahead and get started, I would say.
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, I really enjoyed having all our guests and different folks on in the last few weeks, but I'm ready to do a regular episode here. So,
Yeah.
all right, Troy, are we recording?
We are. Yeah, we got Atheros is in the
Atheros,
house.
Well, look at
welcome.
Atheros.
this. Where have you been?
We're doing well. Glad you can make it, Atheros. This is a good surprise.
All right.
Yeah.
We got
We'll
Big Mac Brass up in here too. Caxips. Evening all.
Is that how you pronounce that? Caxips?
That's I mean, unless it's like the Zhao sound, right?
Mm.
Cajips, maybe. I don't know. Could be anything.
Uh,
If you want to throw that phonetically into chat, so that we don't butcher it, that's cool.
Yeah, let me also throw our Discord server into chat as well, just in case anybody
heck yeah.
live out there wants to come say hey and chat. That's kind of where we're hanging out most days. All right,
Yep,
let's
let's
go
do it.
ahead and get this recorded. If anybody in chat has news or anything that they want us to talk about, just let us know. Otherwise, we're going to roll through and then talk about some D&D at the end. Here we go in
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Bite Size Gaming Podcast, the podcast that's serving up a buffet of RPG topics to get you through your week. My name is Zach, and the hosts joining me this evening are the Dwarven DM, John Christian,
Hello, everybody.
and the Dapper DM, Troy Sandlin.
Greetings and salutations.
Both.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've,
It's a
it's
twofer.
holidays, right?
I like that.
It's twofer.
Being such a giving person.
I am.
We've got a nice group of folks already in chat this evening with us. This is a Sunday evening recording, outside the norm to just do a regular episode on Sunday evening. But we appreciate Kill-A-Lot, Atheros, and everybody else hanging out with us. We're going to be talking about a topic that came up at our table, and actually we brought up here on stream not too long ago,
Mm-hmm.
just in passing. But before we do that, we've got some news for you. I've kind of picked up 3 of them, and I'll just kind of rattle them off, and we can talk about what you guys want to with them. Let's start with the simplest one, which is the Dungeons and Dragons TV show. How about that?
Okay.
Um, so this is a pretty simple. There's not a whole lot to it. But Hasbro's internal like TV development company studio called E1 has said that Dungeons and Dragons TV shows are a big focus for Hasbro right now. In fact, they say our big focus right now. And then they hope to be taking this out to the marketplace with scripted and unscripted shows coming soon, as in taking it out to the marketplace early next year, which means we should have some more news on that relatively quickly, I would think.
Interesting.
Scripted and unscripted, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you see the
Interesting.
bankroll that Critical Role is running, it's kind of
Oh
hard
yeah.
not to want to jump on that and try to get a piece of that pie and see how
Well,
much you can run off of the
I mean, I was wondering. I
formula.
was really wondering if Hasbro was going to try to cash in on that at all, or if they were just going to
Mm-hmm.
do, movies and normal TV shows.
Mm.
I find that very interesting. If they're going to try and cast it as if, similar to Critical Role, or
It. I think the follow-up statement is kind of lets you know that their heart is truly more in the less in the actual play and more in everything else, because they say we have a big movie that's in post right now that will come out first. So we're trying to also navigate the brand more holistically so that the movie feels not apart from but connected somehow to a bigger universe. So that to me says, hey, we want to build a multimedia franchise of lore, and they talk about lore being a big point. Nearly 50 years of lore popping up. So I think that's the target.
That's interesting. It's going to be a while. Then before we're gonna see a TV series or any of if they're waiting until after the movie is done, because the movie doesn't come out until 2023 at this point. So you're looking
Yeah.
at least another year to a year and a half before you're going to see any of that come to fruition. I'm not shocked by the either. Right? It's one of those things where when you've got a property that's doing really really well, you want to capitalize on it, milk it for everything that's absolutely worth. But a lot of the times, that means that there's going to be such a rush to get it to market in order to capitalize on whatever the upswell is in popularity, that you're going to sacrifice quality over that. So we shall see.
And yeah, Atheros is noting there in chat that Hasbro will go for basically any reality play or just any show in general that features any of their products. I think that's true. Like they're not. This is a company that's used to saying, we've got this property, let's find a way to bring it into television. This isn't new turf for them. So yeah,
Hopefully
I
they
mean
do
we've
better
talked about
than
this before, but
hopefully they do better than some of the other properties that have transferred to celluloid, or I guess digital media now. Like you see, like the GI Joe series. I watched Snake Eyes over the weekend, and it was about as unentertaining as I thought it might end up being.
I've not even watched it. I'm a big y'all know I'm a big Joe fan.
Oh yeah.
The fact that he talks,
That you
I'm
see his
like,
face. Yeah.
I can understand the seeing of the face, because it's a movie. It's hard to have a movie where the main character has no face.
Mhm.
I get that.
That's why you didn't like
So,
Halloween Kills, isn't it? You never actually got to see his face. That's the real reason why.
oh no, the real reason why I didn't like
I
that
know
movie
why you
is because
didn't.
it's a Stevie pile
awful.
of crap.
yeah, because
But,
it's so
I'm
bad.
not defending
It's
it.
so bad.
I'm not
It's
defending it.
so
I just wanted a troll. That's all it was.
You know,
that's
it. I will say this: if I would have gotten to see Michael Myers' face in Halloween Kills, I would have kicked it up a point,
Interesting.
which would have given it a point.
Bear Droid is saying that making an actual play interesting may be one of the most difficult things on the planet. I agree.
Oh yeah,
I do
Agreed.
think that I haven't gotten to watch a lot of it, which maybe speaks to the falsity of what I'm about to say because I could have made time for it, I suppose. But I've been listening to some of Colville's Dusk actual play,
Hmm.
where he has edited it down and got rid of all the ho hums and looking at math and looking up rules and things. It's definitely better, 100%
Hmm.
better. I'm not saying that it's the best thing ever, but I would be keen to see more investigation that way.
If you want to check out one, check out Glass Cannon, the Glass
Mm,
Cannon podcast. That's exactly what they do. They
hmm
they take out all of the extra stuff. I mean, if something needs to be in there to make it make sense, they'll leave
hmm
like the rules question or whatever in there.
hmm
But for the most part, they edit it out, and it's actually really good. And you get like little 1 hour chunks, so it's pretty good.
Hmm.
Cool. Let's move on to the next one. This is another small one here. Let's do the World of Darkness one. Um, this kind of goes hand in hand with something that's already been announced, and this isn't perfectly recent news, but it's something that we hadn't talked about yet, and that is that um, Demiplane, which is where the creators of D&D Beyond headed off to
Hmm.
um, after D&D Beyond, have now made a World of Darkness, which is like vampire and werewolf and things like that. A World of Darkness D&D
Nexus.
Beyond-esque
Yeah.
product. Yep.
Hmm.
And they've also made a Pathfinder one. So if
Hmm.
you are a Pathfinder 2e player or a World of Darkness vampire, werewolf, or hunter player, this is your opportunity. It's very, very, very much like um, D&D Beyond, but it's got some cool stuff like I believe it has like video and voice conferencing, like you can
Hmm.
just play right in alongside there. Um, it's got shared notes, matchmaking, all sorts of cool things. And it is, I believe, the World of Darkness one is currently in the alpha testing. So you could go ahead and check it out and give feedback and things like that before the official launch.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're looking at. They've said it's in 2020 is the launch, or 2022, excuse me, is the launch. But
2022.
they're going to have an early access phase to where you can beta and feedback.
hmm
So if you're
Yeah.
interested in all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think this is an easy move for somebody to sweep in. You know, we've had D&D Beyond folks on before, and one of the things we talk about is with D&D Beyond is we'd love to have other systems or third-party content or
Yeah.
whatever at
Mm.
play. So
And
this
so would
is
they.
so would they, and this is Demi Plane stepping up and trying to fill that gap, and I think they're doing a good job by picking these two particular marketplaces to start with. um,
I can think of a couple better ones, but
fair
what do you
enough.
think?
I think World of Darkness is a pretty easy one to implement. So that might be the knee jerk there. I'm sure that also there is a let's work with the people who are easiest to work with first,
Hmm.
right?
That could be.
Um, and Bear Droid's bringing up the idea that yeah, that Renegade I think is who owns the vampire licensing right now. Um, and it's if we get this, then this is also a clue that maybe we'll get some other Hasbro stuff like GI Joe and Power Rangers and things like that, right?
Hmm.
That's interesting.
This might be a test of those waters.
Hmm.
All right. Last but not least, this one has been covered numerous times by us, but we're going to cover it again, and that is we have more news on the Marvel Multiverse RPG coming very, very soon, at least in playtest form. They gave us a whole bunch of new announcements. Um, I've seen both February and March, so sometime in there, they are going to release a $20 playtest rulebook that has been announced. Um, it's going to have a whole bunch of new or a whole bunch of existing Marvel superheroes that you can play as pre-gens, or there'll be guidelines for making your own. It has a list of stats: might, agility, resilience, vigilance, ego, and logic, which I think are cool. And then the big announcement as part of it is that it is going to use a new system that uses three six-sided dice, or 3d6, and it's going to be called the D616 system. Um,
Yeah.
and if you roll a 6, a 1, and a 6, you evidently get something very fantastic as a result.
Ooh, that's kind of cool.
I
I like
think
that.
that's in reference to like essentially their effective Earth Prime. The
Yeah,
primary
we are.
universe is Earth 616, right?
Well,
Hmm
we are Earth 616.
Oh, we are. I gotcha.
Yeah, it's like what the main storyline of the comic books where they all interact. That is Earth 616. Anything that's like a what if
Mm-hmm.
is on one of the other worlds. So you could effectively say it's the Prime, but it's just the one they picked. So it's not like Earth 1.
Hmm. Yeah, and Baradroid is pointing out in chat that it's actually on Amazon right now for $10 for the playtest pack. So you can't get it right now, and but it's 104 pages, and Amazon's saying end of March. So that's cool.
That's
It does bring Spider-Man, Captain America, Captain Marvel, Wolverine, and more are the heroes that are listed.
So how do we feel about paying for playtest?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
As long as they keep it pretty cheap, it's cool to kind of get ahead of it. The not $10 is
Yeah, I
reasonable to
mean,
me. If it were a
yeah.
penny more than that, I might grumble about it a little bit
Well,
more.
I have a problem when it comes to like the Paizo way of doing it, where it's like, we want $50 for a
Yeah,
playtest book,
yeah.
Hmm.
um, and we have a deluxe like linen cover playtest book
Mm-hmm.
that's $90. Like it's kind of
That has a lifespan of
that's
like
kind of
six
jokey
months.
joke.
Yeah, yeah. That's my thing. It's like, okay, so what am I going to do with it after the actual copy comes out if you've changed a bunch of stuff?
Right. Put it on my shelf as a collector's item. That's the only thing I can
Yeah.
imagine, right? Is like somebody wants to be a part of wants to be a part of it so badly that they want to have that. Like it's almost like a $10 entry fee for feedback into
Hmm.
the playtesting, maybe.
Hmm
I mean, I
hmm
play tested the crap out of D&D Next, and I got all that for free.
Mm-hmm.
I
But I
think
think it's
I
more of a
think the
model. Go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say, yeah, I think there is an argument to be made that if you charge something for access to your product, that you
Mm-hmm.
get better feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The buy-in is like, if somebody's paid $10, then they're serious about it. If you do free, you're getting a ton of feedback, but 80% of it is from people that didn't buy it, will never buy it, and just want to go find something to complain about,
Mm-hmm.
or want to make sure that their voice is heard when they weren't a customer anyways.
I don't think that you get a bunch of extra feedback for free. Honestly, you just get those people that want to play the game or see what's going on. Because if you haven't, because to your point, I don't have any skin in the game. I didn't pay for this. I don't need to get feedback. I don't care.
I could see though, with a big name like Marvel or Paizo or whatever, that if I bounced in, if you said, "Hey, free PDF of the playtest," I would bounce in no matter if I was interested in playing Pathfinder 2 or not, download the PDF and do a quick scan.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I might not read the whole thing, but if it's free, I'll go do a quick checkout, right? And if I did a quick scan and was like, I mean, I'll tell you what I did with the playtest, right? When I got the playtest book, I flipped through it and said, "What's new that catches my eye?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Oh, there's this whole like magic weapon special cool thing." I'm like, "I'm interested in that." Oh, they've got Goblin as a main race. That's interesting. Nothing else really exciting popped out at me. And so now I've since learned more and I have more opinions, but initially when I looked through 2E playtest, I was like, I don't really feel like this is doing a whole lot that's new or interesting. Um, and that was just the knee jerk statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it's something
so
that like the model that you can see an argument for that's already existing is video games. Early
Hmm.
access and beta access to video games, it costs you a, you know, a portion, like a fraction of what the game actually would be, and sometimes you can get in on it early enough to where you can beat the retail price on it, and then it just rolls over from the playtest version or beta version that you're in over to the main one. It's a little. This is obviously going to be different because there's a physical component to it, but I mean they do that with video games all the time, where some games will stay in beta for years before they actually hit like a retail or before they're officially released, and people are paying for it up until that point. They're paying subscriptions even. Subscriptions for beta for playtesting games. So it's not unheard of. Yeah. I'm with Zach on this. I think you're gonna get more. You're gonna get people that are invested in the feedback. Like maybe you're not gonna get more. I don't know if that's gonna be the case or not.
Yeah, I don't think.
I think you're gonna get more cogent, deliberate, and thoughtful feedback as opposed to just like anyone that wants to scream at someone else. They have the ease of access into it because they got a free buy into it.
If you get any extra feedback, I think it'll be like early, and then it will go away because it's like they'll do their "Why can't I be a Jedi in D&D?" and that'll be it. You know, they'll never say anything else.
You guys are going to hear a great question that we got. I'm going to believe that this question was made in jest, but there was no jest about the way it was asked or the response afterwards. Someone on the Skyrim board game Kickstarter was asking if we were going to implement any mod stuff into the game. Specifically, they love the mod that introduces lightsabers into Skyrim, and they were wondering if we had any rules or any guidelines for using mod content in the board game. We're like, there will not be lightsabers in Skyrim.
Oh my God.
I would like to take that person aside and just say, explain to me how you see that actually happening.
I just have one question for you.
Board game.
Do you think you are?
Yeah.
Sir or madam?
Yeah. And Bear Droid's asking, and I think this is a valid question. Like, why why not just do a Kickstarter for Marvel Multiverse and let that be your playtest and say anyone who pledges at the $10 level or above gets access to the playtest material.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a level of complication that they want to avoid. I don't know. So that's our news for this evening. Yeah. Good and clean.
Good and clean. I like
it. Let's see here. We've got some comments. Let me make sure that we cover these comments before we dive in.
I like the Atheros' comment about back to Kickstarter, and basically they sent out the playtest of the game, and every time a change was made, they sent out an update for free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's like that's
pretty
cool.
Yeah, they did the same thing with the Hellboy one that I backed a while back. They had probably 3 different versions before they actually printed it. People went through it with a fine-tooth comb. Essentially what they did is they crowdsourced some of their editing and grammar checks, spell checks, and stuff like that, which was smart. Yeah. And then it gave people an opportunity to kind of take a look at it, kick the tires, and it was all pretty much there. And you'd already bought into it because you were part of the Kickstarter anyway. You were at least going to get the PDF anyway. And so they went through several iterations before they actually sent it to the press for printing. Which I can see that. I can definitely see an argument for that. The positive.
Oh, for sure.
And that would be the way that you could emulate that video game mentality of, I buy into it at a lower price, I get to play test, beta type stuff, and then once it goes live, I get the actual version. And
you're kind of subsidizing the cost of each thing that you're giving out ahead of time. But because they're doing a lot of the lift of some of the rules, kicking the tires and editing and stuff like that, helping you out with that.
Yeah, because like what Zach was saying, pay $50 for a playtest book for Paizo or something like that. It's like, oh, and then I got to turn around and pay $50 when it gets released. No, this way I get what I get. Yeah, don't give me a super nice jazzy playtest book I don't need that. I mean, if I
Yeah.
want one,
Fair enough. Yeah.
make me pay $90 for it because it's super cool.
Well, the thing, it was like a Sears catalog, like an old Sears
Yeah.
catalog. It was the old thin glossy paper. It reminded me like an Olin Mills catalog, man, from back in the day. It's not something you're gonna keep. It's not gonna stand. It's like, I don't. To me, it wouldn't last for more than 6 months anyway at my table. It would just disintegrate.
Yeah.
$50
The
for that.
Montgomery Ward.
Yeah.
Well, hey, with that, let's refill our cups and then let's dive into our topic for the evening.
Yep.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, and we're back. And chat has some amazing comments while we were gone. So
Yeah.
thank you, chat, for keeping us entertained.
Always entertaining.
All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about splitting the party. This was kind of came to our forefront of our minds after John's story of character death and dismemberment from a couple weeks ago, and so I think that this is going to be an interesting conversation because I think we have a variance of opinion when it comes to this topic.
Yes.
So let's start there. Let's start with a simple yay or nay. In our opinion, should the party split on a regular basis? And by a regular basis, let's say a quarter of all sessions or more.
Can we be more specific? Are we talking about splitting in regards to the narrative, or are we talking about like splitting tactically in combat?
I think I'm thinking more of running two different scenes
Okay.
simultaneously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I think that's the way I would split it, because like I think if a party chooses, and we could talk about that, but like you start to get into the weeds when you talk about splitting the party in a combat where it's like, well, this group went over into the next room. Is that counted as splitting the party?
For me, well, look, let me give me like
Sure, yeah.
a couple of minutes with it there.
Yeah.
I don't want to gloss over the combat, because to me that's what happened in my game was that I had one group of players head one direction, another group of players had the other direction, and had they focused fire like I thought that they would. Like that was my mistake, thinking for 1 second, like building an encounter where I thought that the players would zig whenever I should have known they were going to end up zagging. But mine was like it was combat oriented. Now, because it's two different answers for me if it's combat versus narrative, but they're similar. Because to me, whenever the players, it's all about action economy in combat, right? So what you want to try to do is not necessarily reduce the number of hit points on the table for the bad guys. You want to reduce the number of actions that any of the bad guys can use against you and your party. And so by doing that, you take, instead of fighting 10 things separately, you want to fight one thing so that they have 10 actions on round 1, 8 actions on round 2, 5 on round 3, right? So thinking strategically like that, or thinking tactically like that, was kind of what I was getting at. As a player, that's probably the best way for me to do it. As a player, I'm all about focusing fire, and if I'm a leader character or anything like that, then I'm always trying to direct my allies to fight to fight one person, and if not, if I'm the rogue or which I rarely am, but if I'm the soloist, almost kind of a player, I'm still trying to wrangle people towards fighting one thing just so that we can drop things faster. So at least that's the way that I end up running it. So that's whenever I think about creating combat encounters, I'm not expecting the players to literally scatter in 6 disparate like locations on the map, and everybody's fighting something all by their little lonesome. And it's like there's dividing all of their potential and their combat potency.
Yeah, I think that's like Who? So I think I would draw the line, and maybe I'm wrong in doing this, but I consider splitting the party when you are on different maps or in different scenes altogether, right?
Okay.
Like, and I could be wrong, or I'm not saying that that's the way we have to distinguish it, but I think that as long as we're all on the same grid,
Mm-hmm.
like now we're splitting hairs about what I think. Like, where's the line where the DM knows that you're in over your head, but you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be a 5 foot line, or it could be a 500 foot line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could be, well, the rogue walked into the room by himself and triggered the uh, portcullis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now he, split the party because he was 5 feet, 5 feet separated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so let's stick with you, John. Let's stick with you. Where do you fall on splitting the party, just in general? I know now as you told us about it, you as a player, but like if you had your druthers as a DM, like do you want your party to split up? Do you want them to stay together?
Combat, honestly, I don't care in combat. In this instance, I anticipated them not splitting up, and they did, and so that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And everything with the layout, in order to kind of like maneuver things around for them to not penalize them for not thinking the way that I thought that they would, because that's not. I'm not saying that it's not fair, but it's also not. It can also be not fun or interpreted as not fun. I really couldn't move the pieces on the board around fast enough to accommodate for them going literally in opposite directions. So I wouldn't really mind all that much. I'm usually pretty flexible with that. Narratively though, that's what I'm thinking more like when you're talking about like on different grids, like the rogue wants to go into the cave and look around before the party goes into the cave and actually scout it out, or two players want to diverge in the dungeon and they want to check out the treasury while everybody else goes and does something else.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's situational. It's really because it can be. There are a lot of there's some pros to it. There are a lot of cons that are. It's more upkeep for me as the DM. It's like in having to wrangle, juggle, and spin plates between the people that are moving around. For the players, it's a lot of sitting around and waiting. Some players, I'm going to be here for 4 hours, and I'm going to spend an hour and a half of that 4 hours not really doing anything because I'm waiting for somebody else to finish out whatever this narrative is, right? It can at least turn into that. I mean, there are a lot, right? But some of the pros, which I won't go into all of them yet, some of the pros of it are that you can get more story in less time doing that. I mean, if they break out in the narrative, then things are starting to run in parallel to one another, and you can get some context from over here, get some context from over there. Some of the things and so more things are happening all at once, and so there's some benefit that can definitely happen to that. I think the one thing you run into a possible peril with that though is meta information between the different members of the party. You've got 6 people sitting at the table. 3 of them are doing one thing. 3 of them are doing another. All 6 of them hear what both groups are doing. They both know what's going on, and then if they want, then they have to play dumb whenever they get back together and explain what happened, or you just hand wave it. So it's just more. To me, there's more management that you've got to do whenever, and it's exponential. The more groups that are broken out, if it's just 2, it's one thing, but it's exponentially more complicated and more time intensive. The more groups that it breaks out into, the groups of like 3 groups, 4 groups, etc. Not a clear answer, not a yay or a nay necessarily. Sorry, I don't have like there's not like a binary response for it. It's situational, and it really depends on the group. For me, like how patient they are. Like I've got my players in my Friday game are very, very patient and they're fine letting other players chew the scenery for an hour or longer, and it doesn't bother them at all. Whereas if I were sitting at a public play table, I would expect people to want their own spotlight. They paid for the ticket, they came to play and be engaged, and not just be like having like exposition vomited at them and other people play the game, they want to be engaged and do something in it too. You know,
Hmm.
so long form games you can probably get away with it. Those short form modules, I think it's harder to do too.
Hmm.
That's a
Hmm.
good point.
Yeah, I don't know what you think, Troy. I'm of the opinion that I like a party being split as long as there are bounce back points at some point throughout the session where the party reconvenes and then splits again. Like, I am happy to run, by and large, I've yet to run a game where I didn't like running a split group. But what I want is I want to draw those two or three groups together to an impact point where they can dump each other information, trade resources, communicate, play with each other. And then if they want to immediately or very soon thereafter diverge again, maybe in different groups or whatnot, like I think I think it's way easier to when a party is split, I think it's way easier to create moments for individual characters.
No, I agree with that. I do. You want to give like
Um,
if you want to give somebody that lime like legit, you're the one that everybody's focusing on. That's how you do it, right? You take all of the
mhm.
other elements that like the other stars out of the scene, and you give that one person this. It's kind of sitting in front of the camera.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it players like in some group dynamics, a perfect example is one of the Alien games that are being played right now. Probably more both of them, but certainly one of them. Um, the group is composed of approximately two people or two characters who are the leaders, and the others not. If they all stay together, those two players will have more spotlight time just by default because they're the
Mm.
decision makers as characters. Thus, they are making a lot of the decisions and being addressed by a chunk of the NPCs on a regular basis. As soon as they split up, those other characters get those opportunities much more easily. And we can create scenes for characters a whole lot easier when I'm not trying to create a scene for four people and I can say, like, all right, there's only two people here. What can I do that's really interesting for at least one of these two characters? Uh, that's the funnest piece of it, right? Um, I adore getting to say like, all right, so if the leaders were here, this would happen, but they're not here. So
Mm-hmm.
let's do the other thing, right? Like maybe the NPC would address like there's some information or there's a line of inquiry or just a through line that comes up when the paladin's gone, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Well, the cat's away. The mice can finally play. And players will do it intentionally too, right? The goody if the goody two shoes players, they'll actually distract them or have them go do something else while they do the more the gray work, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
whenever they're not looking.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are,
Yeah.
I think those are good. I'm with you. I'm with you on those. Again, it boils down to just situational, right? The you have to have the right group of players. Maybe it's unplanned, or not necessarily unplanned, but kind of like off the cuff. Sometimes is when it becomes more complicated, as opposed to you're getting really close to the end of the session, and you say, "All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and call it there." And what we'll do is these people will do the next session while the others hang out and do something else, or like you guys show up an hour later or 2 hours later or something like that. That way, there's less like hang and wait time for some of the other players too, just from a scheduling perspective.
Hmm.
I don't know.
How?
I
What about you, Troy?
well, there's a couple points that got brought up that I think is very interesting. Bear Droid brings up a point that is solely kind of sits where I'm at with the whole Obi-Wan heading off to turn off the shields while everybody else goes to find Leia. Um, John brought up focusing fire,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to address that. Um, but here's because I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and which is why I kind of I threw this topic idea out there and was really hoping that we would do it sooner rather than later. Um,
Hmm.
because I got to thinking about this. It's like, and I don't remember who said it. Might have been me. Might have been somebody else in an episode or 3 or 4 back about movies.
Mm-hmm.
Every movie you watch, every action movie you watch, almost every one, they split the group.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my players.
Yeah.
I had read you some of some of the
Yes.
dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah, one of them was like, well,
That's
I mean,
right.
like in a movie, like
You split
one
the
guy
group.
can go and do one thing and he's cool, another guy can do another thing. But now the only way we can do this is if we're all together. If it's Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn staying in that same little space the
Yeah.
entire time.
Yeah. Perfect example right there. If you played Lord of the Rings like you play in a D&D game, Sam and Frodo don't leave because you can't split the group. And I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot. Focusing fire and not splitting the group are constructs of the game and gaming in general,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a storytelling game. So why should you have to focus fire, and why should you not be able to split the game or split the group? I think those two things are only there to make it easier in a meta sense and for the DM, because you can figure out ways of, in combat, if both groups are in two different areas and they're having combat, you can figure out a way to make that flow.
Mm-hmm.
If one group's over here shopping and the other group's over here doing something else, you can figure out how to make that flow. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying, Andrew asks, why is that bad? I'm not saying it's bad. What I'm saying is, it's not the only way to play. Why should we punish a group of players because they want to split up and do something cool? Well, man, if we can get Obi-Wan to go and shut off the shields, we can go find Leia. Nope, if that was a D&D game, nope, can't do that. Why? Well, can't split the group. You don't get that extra oomph, and like what John was saying earlier, it's like you get to spotlight players more, spotlight their characters more. You get to kind of focus in on what they're doing a little bit more, giving them that time to shine and come up with stuff. I feel like maybe it's up to the DM to kind of think about that during encounter building. Well, this is a spot where they could split up the group, and if they go this way, what can we do to make that stuff fun and not kill them, but give them as much challenge for that small group
Mm-hmm.
that they would have had if they were all together, and then this other group the same thing. Because like for combat, if I have groups that split, I just keep the initiative order. And it's like, okay, you and you are in room A, and okay, player 1, room A, player 2, room A, player 3 is in room Z. Okay, you're going to do this. My monster in room A does this. Player in room, and just bounce back and forth and just keep it going. So it might not end at the same time, or it might do whatever, but it's like it's become such a meme. Don't split the party. Why not? Everything else, because DMs are always saying, I let my players drive the story. Well, if you've beaten it into their heads that they're not supposed to split the group,
This comes down to, and I think Andrew's hitting on it here in chat a little bit, but it comes down to, though, like one of the key notes, which is that, and this is the thing that I think we strain against sometimes with narrative, is that we are still playing a game with mechanics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's when those mechanics fight against Obi-Wan going off by himself and having like a non-combat encounter while Luke and Han are rolling for initiative, right? That's the tricky part of it, in the sense of, yeah, you can say, oh, you're doing this thing, and then we bounce back to you and you say, You know, I pull the next lever. Oh, and then we bounce back to Luke and Han. Oh, and they're shooting at like you can do that. You can absolutely do that, and
Yeah.
there's ways to do it, but the game does not facilitate that in
No.
a smooth way.
Well, there's also what you can consider like just throwing this, slapping this term together, and maybe narrative uh, momentum, right? Where you're like, when you start splitting the group out and the narrative starts diverging into different directions, like we're gonna get to a certain point, All right, stop this. We're gonna stop the train here. We're gonna shift gears and go over to this other scene that's going over here, and we're gonna get to a stop where a place where I can stop, and we're gonna pick it back up over here. And so you're constantly having to like spin it back up and grind up to that back up to speed again over and over again. And then like the other thing too is just it's the plate spinning. It's tough sometimes. The more like two directions is one thing, three or four directions in particular is, it's not necessarily trying to be lazy, but holy crap, that takes to me at least, it takes a lot of energy whenever I'm sitting at these tables and I've got like six people doing six different things and having six different conversations, or one guy's pickpocketing somebody, one guy's doing this, one girl's doing this. That gets, I like, it wipes me out.
But to me, that is also part of, it sets on the player's shoulders as well, because it's like, look, you guys split the group.
Mm-hmm.
You thought that was a great idea, so now
Mm-hmm.
the two of you are going to have to sit there and be cool with it while I focus on these people because they're doing something, and it's a role-playing encounter. You guys are in combat, so we'll go through, your rounds of combat. Okay, now we're going to spend about 5 minutes with you guys. Role play, role play, role play. Okay, stop
I
right
love.
there, and I'll come back and do it again. But it's like that's what you guys decided. That's what the group decided to do. So that's what you're going to have to be okay with. If you don't like the way that flows, then you need to come up with that constraint on your own to not split your group. But y'all wanted to do this, so that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I love the statement that you made there about if the players choose it, then you kind of like let that be on them, right? All right,
Mm-hmm.
the party understood that they were splitting up here
Yeah.
one way or another, right? So, you're gonna have to accept the fact that that means that there's going to be some moments here where you're going to be sitting on your hands.
Yeah.
Unless you've got some like really opinionated or vocal players, like you'll have one party member maybe the person that chose rogue because they want to be able to be the scout, and they scout out so they will scout out the entire dungeon ahead of time. If you let them do, like, now granted there are ways of mitigating that, right? You can make it more of a theater of the mind, or more of a, kind of like a montage of things that happen. But like they do that repeatedly. But like I told you guys before, the way that I handle it sometimes is it's like it's 10 minutes, and what happens is depending on the speed at which the player is willing to go, I'll start speeding up, like at the 5 minute point, and it just starts turning into like hand wave, roll, 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 until like, and we're done. Now I can get them back, like, and like plug them back in with the party. They're satisfied with that 10 minutes in the spotlight of all their own little thing that they did, and then we can continue forward, right? But when you have one player that's their thing, and it happens over and over and over again, and the other players at the table are like, "Oh my god, we're doing this again." Like, unless they're really vocal, they're like, "Dude, it's fine." You may not have people that are going to be that willing to step out and say that to another player and kind of like step on their good time.
Well, then you kind of like, it's also incumbent upon the DM, I think, to then, if you've got that rogue or assassin or whatever that wants to creep ahead and check stuff out, fine. What else is the rest of the group doing? Have you decided all you're going to do is stand there and wait for them to come back?
Mm-hmm.
There's other stuff you could do. Come up with a better plan. Or, okay, fine. They're going to go in and scout ahead. Put something in that's not too far into the dungeon where it's like, oh, there's something, I can't go any farther, I got to go back.
Oh, yeah, and there are a dozen different ways of dealing with it. I think what I'm getting at is that you're constantly having to put that in place, like expecting that one player is going to do that over and over again, as opposed to trying to keep them cohesed as a unit, and so
I
there's always one person that wants to
I
solo.
I think that there's a danger in that though. Like I'm gonna be opinionated here, I guess, but
Okay.
like I think there's a danger in the sense of my opinion is that the party is made up of individuals that have wildly different skill sets, ideally,
Hmm.
and especially when those skill sets are divergent,
Hmm.
that you have splits that are almost necessary. If everybody's a paladin, then you can have a group moving through the through everything. But more than likely, you have a rogue that wants to scout ahead. Great, awesome. Or sneak around or do something,
Hmm.
off on the side. And they're going to get some spotlight there and they're going to use up some time there. And
Hmm.
that's not, and it's going to happen every time. But then also, you're going to have a paladin or a bard or both that vie for the conversation
Hmm.
time whenever you run into an NPC, right? And you're going to have um, a barbarian who has to describe every swing of their axe or who has a call out that they want done at the thing, or you have a wizard that anytime you run into anything that's magic at all, they
Yep.
want to identify, they want to detect magic, they
Hmm.
want to open up their books, they
They're
want
in
to
the
roll an arcana
library.
check, they're in the library,
Yep.
like and so I just trust that I love that. I want to give all those people their time to shine, and that means that when they're doing their shine thing, the rest of the group is going to have to find a way to either be uh, meaningful in that moment, or they're going to have to wait.
They're gonna have to wait.
Um, but um, uh, then I think then it comes down to me to get back to John's point. I think then it comes down to me to say, okay, the rogue is we haven't had a combat in a while, or at least an intense combat or a long combat. So the barbarian and the rogue are both missing their mojo. We've been in town for the last 4 sessions, and the wizard and the bard and the paladin have had a heyday. Um, the next combat needs to be something that benefits the rogue and the barbarian pretty heavily.
Hmm.
Um, I don't worry about that as a session, within the same session sort of a thing. But I do think about it as far as like, uh, if we just had a whole session where the bard got the spotlight, let's make sure that somebody else can have the spotlight
Hmm.
for a chunk of this one, even if it means that I have to run up a combat that was not part of the original adventure, just to give other people the opportunity. Um,
That's more of like a reaction to, or not a reaction necessarily. That's you do. It's self management, right? Where it's like
Hmm.
you're aware of, you're keeping it like a mental note and ticking off every time somebody gets that their moment or the thing that they get to do where they get to shine. You're mentally ticking that off, as opposed to what I feel like sometimes players are doing is like, I'm not getting enough, and so I'm pushing it in this direction to make sure that I get the time that I'm not necessarily
and
that
I
I'm
think
owed, but that I'm looking for.
I think what you just said and what chat's saying, and I want to point this out, I think that it's more often that players say, I've taken up too much time,
Hmm.
than that they say, I didn't get
That's
enough.
true. Well, and I think that I see
Um,
that in home
I've had
games. I don't
both.
see that
I've had
in,
yeah,
both.
yeah, I don't see that
yeah.
in the public play games very often,
Yeah.
where somebody's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take up so much time." It's like there's almost a competition between some of the players at the table of like trying not they're not yelling each other down necessarily, but there's like they're trying to polish their own moments,
Mm-hmm.
in order to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that they like, otherwise why am I here, kind of thing. There's like
Yeah.
it's like a healthy
Yeah.
competition, or maybe it's not healthy, I'm not sure.
Because you said it, and it's been brought up a couple of times in chat. It's splitting the group is very situational on
Hmm.
how you're going to handle it and the benefits of it and everything else. It's hard to do in public play because yeah, it's not a continuing story and you've only got 4 hours.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also feel like it kind of goes back to that whole the Matt Mercer effect. People that watch Critical Role, it's like they split the group all the time.
Hmm.
And why can they do it and it's effective? Because it goes back to that. To me, it's the Critical Role effect. It's not just Matt Mercer. It's
Mm-hmm.
everybody sitting at that table. They are all there to see what everybody else is going to do, not just their character. So as soon as you have that level of buy-in, you can split the group, because then if, and it shouldn't, but if two people take up the next hour of play doing something that they're doing off on the side, and everybody else is waiting for Matt to get back to them or the DM to get back to them, that's
Yeah.
part of it, because then you're going to get the spotlight for an hour and they're going to have to sit there. So it's a trade-off. So if you want that level of storytelling, you have to be that level of player to get it. And that
Yeah.
means while your friends across the table are doing something and the spotlight is focused on them, you are sitting there, you're still attentive, you're still enjoying the game, you're not catching the latest episode of your favorite TV show on Netflix, or you're not rummaging around in the kitchen or on the phone or something like that. You're engaged in the game. And that's hard to find. That's hard to find.
That's what I refer. That's the professional player, though. They're professional, right? The critical role players are professional players.
That's yeah. Okay, they're professional, but that has, to me, that has nothing to do.
I agree. Before, like, I agree with you that to me that is a player etiquette that I would like to see a lot more of adopted by all players, and not necessarily. But I think what I'm getting at with critical role, just for the listeners out there to distinguish it, is kind of what Bear Droid is saying too. Is like that they are players that are paid to play, and so they're paid to sit and let the others players soak up the scene and chew up the scene and do all that kind of stuff and be attentive and listen, and like, I don't know how much they've also been together for a long time. This is a long-standing group, right?
Exactly.
And this is the dynamic that they've developed over
because
time,
I completely disagree on that.
Uh-huh.
Because you have how many other streams out there that are successful, not obviously not to the extent of Critical Role, but you know, the best ones are doing the same thing. They're attentive.
Yeah, I agree.
They are invested in what the rest of the group is doing. It has nothing to do with being paid or not, because you can watch them on there. They're like into it, and they'll be like, "Oh, did you see what he just did? Oh, wow, that's so cool. Oh yeah, that, you know," and they're making notes, or they're doing whatever, but they are invested in the story beyond their piece of paper, and that's what a lot of times we don't have at our tables, is players that are invested to that extent, especially in the public play space, because they don't know the other 5 people sitting at the table.
Well, and I'm not going to disagree with you necessarily, but it's the cynic in me more so than anything else that says, whenever you say that the critical role players are genuinely attentive versus, like, that's their job, is to look attentive and be attentive.
It is now. It wasn't before.
No, maybe not. And of course, I can't go historically. I could, but I haven't gone historically back and looked at, like, whenever they first started playing. Are they consistent? Do they do the same thing? Do they play the exact same way? Maybe they do. I can't. But again, though, that's like I don't expect it, even though I would like it out of my players, for them to have the same level of courtesy and attentiveness for the other players. I can't. Again, in the public play space, I just haven't seen it manifest itself. So it's constantly this. It's a juggling act that you have to do in order to keep them engaged. When other people are doing something, you have to go back in and check in on them. Like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?
You have to, but my argument for all that is, if you've got someone that's you know, being impatient because, you know, maybe they're a combat monkey.
Mm-hmm.
They're being impatient because these 2 people are having a little bit of a role playing moment, and they're kind of there. It's like, man, when's the next fight? When's the next fight? They're not paying any attention to what's going on, and it's like, hey, well, we just had 2 combats back to back, and you had a great time. Now that's your thing. They were not involved in that combat, and they sat there just fine watching what was going on and rooting you guys on and being attentive. But now you are being selfish because you don't want them to have their spotlight. You don't want them to be able to enjoy the game in a way you might not, and that's fine. But if they're your friend, or, you know, everybody paid the same amount of money, whatever it might be, show them that same courtesy. You guys split the group. It all goes back to that. The players chose to split it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Some of the players, though, right?
a DM will always do their best to kind of show you could all stay together and do this. Well, we want to split it and go. It's like, okay.
Well, hang on though. But do you? Because now you're. That's you're talking about two different things though. Are you intentionally trying to navigate them together and do something together, or are you just because that's almost like it's like you're by saying, well, you guys could stay together and do this too. It's really kind of like telling them what you really want them to do and kind of like telegraphing.
Well, no, I'm not saying you.
No.
No, I'm just saying you got this stuff out, and here's your 3 options that you can get done.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I guess you could split the group.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way I designed it, but you can split the group. You're not going to tell them that because they don't need to know that.
Let me take it in a different direction real quick. Like, is there, let's approach this from a different angle. Is there systems that we think are well suited to splitting the group versus systems that aren't, or is it a systemless topic?
I haven't seen a system that's like specifically better than the other personally at whenever you split the party up narratively. Again, we're talking about narratively.
I have an answer for that. It is not system dependent. It is genre dependent. Because if you are in a futuristic game, you've all got headsets. You're all connected anyway. It doesn't matter what part of the ship you're in. You can still talk to each other as if you're standing next to each other. So you're always that way. If a combat breaks out in the cargo hold, but you've got the 3 scientists over here working on the downed computer system, it's all one initiative because it's like, okay, you shoot, the monster shoots at you. Make your roll to see if you can bring the air purifier back online. Because then it becomes because you're in contact. That's to me that's the limiting factor of being of splitting the group is that being apart with some form of constant communication. You're never actually apart. You're just not in the same room. And I think future settings can handle that in a different way.
You're still dealing with context switching between the different scenes. Like things are different, even though they're able to communicate with one another in their disparate scenes. There are still things going on that are completely different in those scenes. Sometimes, like there's a combat here, and there's the other scene. They're trying to BS an Imperial agent that they're whatever. Like they're maybe RP, but it's the same thing. I don't know that I'm not convinced that that's a genre thing. Even if they're able to hear one another, that all that tells me is it eliminates the meta, the meta like the meta. What's the word I want? Pollution, like meta pollution between the two of them. Like I know what you're doing on your side, and you know what I'm doing on my side.
I think
but
that
now
the
they're
other
connected,
thing,
though.
yeah, I think though that there is a difference when you're talking about a technical encounter system. In that case, I think splitting the party is more difficult. If you have a very loose, free-form encounter-based system that resolutions can happen quickly or simply, I think that facilitates splitting the party more easily.
I can see that, like a tiny D6, where it's just like pretty open, flexible, and loosey-goosey.
Yeah. I'm thinking like that. I'm also thinking, oh goodness, you put me on the spot. No, you didn't even put me on the spot. It's just Zach drawing a blank here. Powered by the Apocalypse is one that I think really does a good job of that as well. Because there's really the actions that you take are simple and they communicate a lot of things in one action, right? I want to kick some ass, or I want to investigate a mystery or whatever. Like these are broad statements. And so if you have somebody that if you split the party and somebody's like, investigating a haunted house while the other people are going out into the cemetery, you're both investigating a mystery. You both are rolling the same dice and you're having the same engagements, and things, and it's pretty easy to bounce between the two of you because your actions in doing something are a one-to-one with the other people's actions. And if zombies rise out of the graveyard and start fighting, all we're really doing is swapping your investigate a mystery to your kick some ass. But you're rolling the same amount of dice, same amount of time is passing, yada yada yada, by and large. So I think there is like, I think the more technical combat becomes, if I'm loath to split a party ever, it's when I'm like, if you walk into that room, it's a major combat. And the rest of the people at this table are going to want to be a part of it, and they can't right now. And that's tricky. It's not tricky from a story standpoint. Story-wise, I can flow with it. But it's a tricky because that combat is going to take 2 minutes. And that's 20 rounds in D&D terms. But that 2 minutes is not enough time for anyone else to become a part of this. So, boy, that's where it gets sticky for me.
So then does this shift from how do we feel about it to how do we manage splitting the party? Is that the direction the conversation goes in then? Because
I think part of it, yeah.
Retrospectively, right? I've given a lot of thought to how the kind of the genesis or the seed of this conversation came about. In that combat, whenever I had one group of players go one way and another go the other, to Zach's point, even though 5th edition is to me the least crunchy of the editions that we've seen thus far, so especially since 3rd, right, or since 2nd edition or AD&D.
4th.
Well, 4th was like stupid crunchy, like to the extreme, right? But even 3rd edition was also super crunchy too, just in its own way. But it's less so than in several editions. We'll just say that. Even though it's less crunchy, there's still quite a bit of crunch, and there's still a lot of like technical things, and the kind of the way that the cogs turn in the engine of the game that are, I think, more than anything else, I feel beholden to. I think that's what it boils down. It's like I feel like I'm like I've allowed myself to be enslaved by it because we got to play it. This is D&D, so we got to play it a certain way, right? I'm not saying that that's the way that it always ends up, but in my mind, I think I'm wrestling with that. It's like, is it going to be D&D anymore if I don't do it this way or don't let it unfold the way that it kind of would technically? So if I going back and looking at my last combat, what I really could have done, and I wish I had done now, is when one group went in one direction and the other went south, one went north, I could have re-engineered on the fly a dozen different things about that combat to make it to where each group could still survive or could still be the heroes that they were trying to be. They were trying to have this heroic moment. They were just doing it in different ways. Like the people that stayed behind to fight the boss, right? I could have reduced the boss's hit points. I could have rolled fewer dice for damage. I could have included some mooks in there and some minions instead of having other like full hit pointed, full statted out bad guys. I could have done the same thing in the other direction too, right? So I think that's part of it too. Is like it is the thing that I complain about with veteran players sometimes is like they only look at what's on the page, whereas the new players are like, can I do this? Because they don't know what they can and can't do. It's like, can I do this? Hell yeah, you can do that. That's a really good idea. That's really out of the box thinking. Whereas the veteran players are like, here are the numbers, here are my stats, here are my powers, my background, and that's all that's their character, as opposed to the can I do this? No, this is what I can do. And so I think that I want to reward players that think out of the box, whereas still I'm the DM and I'm still playing and running the game out of that box in my head sometimes. And I think that's probably, if there's any responsibility that I'll take upon myself in that, is that I probably could have been more, I could have broken the box open and just let it be more freeform and then just have a really cool scene, as opposed to, not intentionally like teaching the players a lesson, so to speak. Like, no, you don't waggle my finger, you don't break up the party, and this is why. Kind of thing, I didn't do it. That wasn't the intent, right? But that's kind of essentially what it ended up turning into in their chatter post game. It's like, oh, well, I guess you just can't break up the party in Dungeons and Dragons. That's just the way that it goes. Yeah. There's a reason why they say that,
And that's what really got me to thinking about this stuff, because it's like in like I said, in movies and TV shows, they're always splitting the group. They're
Mhm.
always doing stuff, and it's like, why should we not allow? I mean, because I've done the same kind of things that you're talking about. It's like, oh, you split the group and you went into this one door. Well, in this one, behind this one door is like, the 12 liches that are gonna mess you up. And if all of you were together, you might have a chance. But nope, it's just one of you, so now you're gonna die.
Mhm.
Why? This is my game. I can change whatever the hell I want.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you get locked into that mindset of, well, you guys split the group. I just want to, I just feel like it shouldn't be so meme true, because it's like, yeah, it's a funny thing. Yeah, don't split the party. And everybody takes that to mean, well, if you split the party, you're going to get messed up. Well, yeah, it might be harder. Somebody might be fighting over here. Somebody might be shopping over here. It is what it is. Think of all the other crazy situations that DMs have to deal with. Is flipping switches between a combat mode and a role-playing mode really that difficult in the grand scheme of things for that one session? No. It'll be a chore. It'll test your skills and abilities, but once that 4 hours is done, and now the two parts of the group have met back up, and if they're decent role players, it'll be, you guys look like you got the crap kicked out of you. What happened? And then it's a cool thing. So
I think what we're talking about though, with a lot of stuff that you're saying, is it that difficult, right? Whenever I think of it, maybe it's not that difficult for me, and it's not for you. But the newer DM it's daunting to a lot of the newer DMs out there that haven't done
and
it
to that,
because they haven't flexed that muscle enough, or lifted that weight enough.
To that I say, so what? If it's a new DM and their group splits, good, because you don't get to be a good DM if you don't have your players doing crazy stuff to make you think on your feet. If you get spoon-fed everything, you're never going to improve.
Troy with the tough love for the new DMs. John will give you hugs.
I don't.
Troy will tell you that to suck it up.
I
understand what you're saying.
I'll tell you to suck it up, rub some dirt in it,
Suck
and
it
get
up,
back out
buttercup.
there. And then when you're done, I'm like, now how did that go? Oh my gosh, that was so cool.
Rub some dirt
Told
on
you.
it.
If you didn't have that thrown at you,
No, I'm with you.
oh my gosh, what do I do? I mean, that's how we all came up. We didn't have podcasts and Matt Covilles and Matt Mercers and stuff, holding our hands to tell us how we're supposed to do this shit. Heck, half of us were rolling dice wrong if we even had the dice.
Right.
So buck up. Just get in there and let your players do what your players want to do. Don't punish them because you may or may not want to change the encounter, or you have that stuck in your head. Because I've had it stuck in my head for years. If you split the group, you encounter what's behind that door the same as if you weren't split up, and that's on me.
Hang on though.
And
Is it?
I need to change that.
Let me. I'm going to challenge you at least a little bit on that. Is it though? Always, right? Because
Always
there's,
no,
there's
because
at
it's
least some level of verisimilitude in this, or like believability, or like there's only so much suspension of disbelief that you can kind of incorporate into a game to where people are like, it's before long, it's kind of like, well, you're just kind of like putting this on training wheels for the players, no matter what they do. Like that, like
No.
it doesn't like I'm going to kick down the door and say, behold righteous judgment, Leroy Jenkins, every time I do something. Well, let me re-engineer on the fly for you and like the 15 different directions that everybody else did the same kind of thing. I'm only asking. I'm not trying to be facetious,
Okay,
but I'm
no.
asking. At some point, does it go too far?
I mean, what I'm thinking in my head is like, okay, the whole group all together, full max, juiced up, ready to go, walk through this door. It's going to be a tough to deadly encounter. Oh, only 2 of them are going through that door. It is an instant party kill, right? So now I just have to figure out, okay, so it's not the actual bad guy, it's the lieutenant, and they're going to be powered down to where it's for these two people, these two characters walking in the door, it is now a tough to deadly. There's still that chance. It's still the level of the encounter that I wanted it to be. But now the party is smaller, so the encounter has to change just a little bit. You know, it, so that if it was going to be a cakewalk with all six of them walking through the door, then I've got to change it to something that's going to be a cakewalk for all two of them.
I mean, we may have to agree to disagree on this one a little bit because when if you're talking like the Obi-Wan analogy, right, or example, right, Obi-Wan Solo, I'll use the Han and Chewie running down the halls of the Death Star and running into a room full of stormtroopers, being like, "Oh shit," and they've got to
Yeah.
run the other way, right? Because
Yep.
I think those moments are important too. Whenever they just like they go willy nilly
Right.
and they go off book, and they're just being it gets a little bit silly. Not to
Hmm.
say like I'm the author of what is silly and what is not, but that I think that there's a like a there's a critical mass that you hit, you know, where at some point or another the players have to know that there are repercussions for like again it just boils down to like the believability of it.
Okay.
How long can we keep like how long can we just keep kicking doors down in this keep, and I don't have like I don't pull down the entire keep on my ears, or the boss doesn't like
But
the lieutenant. I'm fighting the lieutenant, but the boss is like going to be like when I turn around he's going to be right behind me breathing down my neck.
okay, so in that scene, Han and Chewie run around the corner,
Mm-hmm.
crap ton of stormtroopers. Okay, rewind it. The group didn't split up. It's all of them together. They walk down that same corridor.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to have happen? Do you want them
Yeah.
to turn around and run? Then you put even more stormtroopers in that hallway and get them to turn around and run. It depends on what you're trying to go for the encounter.
Go ahead,
If
Zach.
if 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 it's the final fight, yeah, you might want to kick that can down the road until the group gets back together, like
Mm-hmm.
what Zach was talking about. But if not,
I think that um, there's 47 different ways of doing it, and my knee jerk is to say that once the door is open, you've lost 46 of your 47 ways. Um, so I think your hands are limited at that point, and I find that the least satisfying answers come when you adjust what's behind the door. If you can find, and not to say that you shouldn't adjust, it's just that that's the least satisfying. I find that if I don't want them to kick down that door, or I don't want them to engage in that situation, or it's going to get rough, it's far better for me to find a way for them to choose that themselves before they're placed in that situation. And as an example, if there's 40 stormtroopers behind the door and they're considering opening it, right? Then um, maybe if it's Luke, I let him I say, "Oh, give me a force check." Oh, on the other, oh, you rolled well, which for me is anything above a 10 in this moment because I need you to know this. Oh, you sense the presence of numerous people, numerous entities behind this door, right? You get a bad feeling about this, right? Um, if it's Chewie and Han, maybe I say, Chewie, as you're standing there waiting for Han to punch the commands into the door, go ahead and give me a perception check. You hear the clink and clatter of numerous feet behind this door, right? Like there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can say, "Oh, let's put Han, you're opening this door. As you're doing that, let's cut over to R2 and C3PO. Roll me an investigation check. Oh, you notice that Han and Chewie are about to open a door that has 50 stormtroopers behind it, right? Like there's a lot of ways that you can get it to where they then make the choice to burn that bridge and become, a split party in a bad situation. Um, I think that there is a sense that players have, though, and I think they can certainly pick it up when you're doing something like that. But I think there's a sense that players have when you have a dial turned up to 11 and you're like, oh, there's two of you instead of four of you entering the room. I'm going to turn that dial down to 8. Um,
I would rather turn that dial down to 8 than absolutely just annihilate those two that walk through that door.
100%. That's why I said. That's why I started with, right. Like there's a point in which you say, I don't want to one shot you, and you have chosen this, so I'm going to turn it down to 8 because I'm still likely to kill you, but at least it's not going to be the worst feeling. I think though that it's just hard. Players know. I think at least players that you're at your home game, they know when you're pulling the punch a lot of the time, or at least they may not know what punches are pulled, but they get a sense that a punch was pulled. So they may say like, maybe that like I had a group with a recent game, and they're like, those dragons weren't played optimally, and I think that was Zach letting us not just get wiped. And I that's not the only thing that Zach did to keep them from getting wiped. But they weren't wrong, right? So it's tricky though, right? Like that's once you lose that feeling of this is quote unquote real and there's consequences for actions, and the DM isn't letting dice fall where they may. He's adjusting things to execute a specific outcome. I'm not saying that you can't have a great time after that, but it loses a little bit of the flavor.
Well, you lose the tension from it, right? Well, and what I'm surprised by is the conversation that Troy and I are having about this right now, considering that I'm a dirty screener and he is not, because Troy does not believe in fudging dice. He let the dice lie where they may, but like whenever they play what's behind door number 2, Troy's deciding on the fly what's behind door number 2, depending upon.
Don't we all?
I mean, I don't, honestly. I mean, like if there's enough of a what I'll do is I'll give them a breadcrumb trail at least of what's kind of to Zach's point, right? Like you can smell brimstone in the air. Well, there's something burning in here. What kind of things are burning in the air? Or like if it's a chlorine smell. Well, it may be a green dragon. Like, well, there's probably a green dragon behind one of the doors here, so we should probably be really careful.
Then what's the difference? It's like, oh, you smell the brimstone, you smell the chlorine. Oh, we're gonna go in anyway. Yep, that's where the hags were. The kettle is sitting there. The brimstone is flowing. Whatever it might be. It's like, oh, they don't know. The dragon just left, and you can see a half-eaten cow or something, and you can smell the chlorine in the air from where the dragon was. It's still, that's not. Is it pulling a punch? Yes, but you're going to punch them in a minute anyway when the group gets back together. So you don't have to. You're not nerfing the encounter. You're just kicking it down the road until everybody's there. You don't want everybody to show up. You want everybody there to fight Vecna at the end, right? You're not going to dumb down that encounter because you want it to be super impactful. And so that's what you do. If for some strange reason, if you haven't crafted your adventure well enough to where your entire group is walking into that room together, it's still on you. And if you're going to make them fight Vecna with only 2 people, then that's your fault.
I can't. How is it always it always seems like it's always the DM's fault though. It's like I don't think it is. I mean, sometimes you do the best you can.
How many times do you sit there and say it's the player's story? I'm just the one letting it unfold in front of them. But then you turn it around and say, "Oh, but if you split it up the group,
no,
I'm going to kick your ass with Vecna because you went to the wrong room."
That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like that at some point or another, like I'm with you to an extent. I think that it gets to a point where they always know that they're going to be on training wheels, no matter how they split or what they do. That there's going to be a safety net that's been beneath them, and I feel that I've seen my players behave differently because whenever they felt like there was a safety net versus whenever they don't. That's one of the reasons why I don't use a screen in some of the big combats, because I want to create an additional level of tension around the combat to let them know that there's no net.
That is the BS part of the screen. Because I use the screen all the time. I'm rolling. Okay, but now I'm going to add extra tension. I'm removing the screen so that way this time
Hmm.
I'm not cheating you.
Well, it's not. Well, it's not
Because you
cheating.
just admitted to it. Call it whatever you want. Fudging the rolls. You just admitted every other time that I have my screen up, I may or may not be fudging these rolls in your favor or in my favor.
I think what
You
it sounds
don't
like
know.
we're doing the same thing. We're just doing it in different places in the game.
Yeah, I tweaking hit points or
That's still fudging. I'm fudging the hit points. I'm fudging the die rolls, right? Or I'm fudging what's behind the door versus I'm going to let what's behind the door sit behind the door. And that
but I'm
maybe it
also
boils
saying,
down to not necessarily who's right or wrong about it, but rather just like maybe it's style of play, or the style of the way that you run the game necessarily. And it all
Well,
kind of it's all a wash.
it's like, well, not really. It's like I said, if okay, I planned this encounter is going to be a super tough encounter, but they're going to be able to survive it. They wanted to take the story into two different directions at that time, and there's two characters walking in the door that was going to be a super tough encounter. If I keep it the same, they're going to die. Now, certain parts of the story, yeah, I might just let it go, and they're going to die. Or I could say, you know what? It kind of makes sense that it's not this person in the room that they're going to fight. I can say, oh, it's the lieutenants. The main person is actually over here, and I can just have this fight that I was going to have with all of them, with the big bad, on down the road for when they're all together again, and make up something different. But I'm going to give those two players the experience of having a fight at the level that I wanted it to be at for those two players, is what I'm saying.
I think
And
we're
yes,
talking about
it's all about turning dials and turning knobs, and
that seems
it's
like
not
two different things though to me, because what you're saying, if we're talking about from what is more satisfying to the players, I get what you're saying. Like if like two people facing off early against the bad guy unintentionally, they face off against the bad guy and get demolished. That's not satisfying. I'm with you on 100% on that one. And then kind of like puttying that what's behind the door a bit more, just to make sure that the whenever it's most opportune or it makes the most sense to the narrative, then bring out the bad guy at that point. That's not about, to me. It's like I think it's two different things though, right? So as opposed to something that's being satisfying versus never giving the players like there's like never a consequence to some of the foolish decisions that the players will make. Not necessarily unintentional or accidental, but like again, a Leroy Jenkinsing just like going pell-mell through a room full of people and pulling down the entire dungeon.
If that's the case, then yeah, all gloves are off. You're going to get what you get. But if it's a cool thing, it's like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense that these three people would go this way and you two would go this way. That's really cool. This is going to be neat, and I can change some things. I can tweak it, and I can make everything better than what I had planned initially. This isn't like, oh, I want my player or my characters to always survive everything. No, I do want them to always survive everything, but on their own merit, which is why I don't use a screen. But I do change hit points, because Andrew makes a good point. Fudging hit points doesn't affect tension like fudging dice rolls, because they can't see the hit points. They can see the dice rolls, or not if you've got the screen up. But then when you take that screen away and go, all right, everything's laid out because I want you guys to see, it's like, well, why don't you do that every other time?
Well, I mean, that's a whole separate
That's a
discussion,
whole separate...
but I mean, the answer is there. I mean, there's a reason that a